I was an outcast, lighting fires while others prepared for the mating ceremony, until the moment the Alpha King's eyes found mine across the flames and changed my destiny forever. What would you do if the very thing that made you different became the power that could save everything you've grown to love? The flames danced beneath my fingers as I arranged the sticks just so, watching the tiny sparks catch and grow. The heat felt like an old friend against my skin, never burning me, always welcoming. Everyone else in the pack was busy with the special preparations, weaving crowns of flowers, practicing their dance steps, painting their skin with the sacred marks that would help them find a mate. Not me. I was the one they kept away from such things. You have the mark, my mother had whispered years ago, her finger tracing the silver moon shape that curved along my collarbone. The elders say it's bad luck to have you join in. Best you stay with what you're good at, child. And so I became the fire tender, the one who works in the shadows while others shine, the one who makes sure the flames never die out, who keeps everyone warm while they laugh and dance and find love. Tonight was the biggest ceremony of all, the night when the Alpha King himself would visit our little pack and maybe choose a mate from among us. I piled more wood onto the biggest fire pit. This one would be the center of the whole ceremony, and it needed to burn bright and hot. My hands moved without much thought, knowing just where to place each log, how to balance them so the air could flow and the fire could breathe. This was my gift. This was the one thing I could do better than anyone else. The sky above grew darker as the sun slipped away, and stars began to peek out one by one. The moon would be full tonight, perfect for the ceremony. I could hear the excited voices from the village growing louder as everyone finished their tasks and began to gather. The smell of roasting meat and sweet honey cakes drifted on the wind, making my stomach growl. I hadn't eaten since morning, too busy with my fires. "Sari," called one of the younger girls. Mina. As she ran up to my fire pit, she was one of the few who ever spoke to me by name. The elders said to make sure the center fire is as big as you can get it. The Alpha King will be here any moment. I nodded and gave her a small smile. "It will be ready. Tell them not to worry." Mina looked at me with big, sad eyes. "I wish you could come stand with us. Your hair is so pretty, even if you never braid it. And your eyes, they shine like the fire you tend." My heart squeezed tight in my chest at her kindness. "That's nice of you to say, Mina. But my place is here, with the fires. Now go on, you don't want to miss your chance to dance for the Alpha." She ran off, her flower crown slightly crooked on her head. I watched her join the gathering crowd, all dressed in their best clothes, their skin painted with swirls of red and gold. I looked down at my own hands, stained with soot and dirt. My simple brown dress had burn marks along the hem from years of standing too close to the flames. I had no paint, no flowers, nothing to make me special or pretty. But it didn't matter. No one would see me anyway. As the drums began their slow, steady beat, I finished building the main fire. It roared to life, the flames reaching high into the night sky, sending a shower of sparks up like tiny stars. The heat pushed back the cool night air, creating a warm circle where the pack would dance. I stepped back into the shadows, finding my usual spot behind the largest fire where I could watch without being seen. The pack formed a circle around the fire pit. The youngest girls came first, dancing with small, careful steps, their arms waving like branches in the wind. Next came the older ones, those of mating age, their movements more sure, more full of meaning. The unmarried men joined next, their feet stamping in time with the drums, their bodies strong and proud. Last came the elders, walking slowly around the outside of the circle, watching with knowing eyes, judging who might be the best match for whom. And then the drums stopped. The dancers froze. A hush fell over the gathering. He was here. The Alpha King entered the circle of firelight like he owned the very air we breathed. And I suppose he did. He was tall, taller than any man in our pack, with shoulders wide as an oak tree. His hair was as black as the night sky, flowing down his back in thick waves. But it was his eyes that caught and held my attention. Even from my hiding place, I could see they were the color of amber, of honey, of the heart of my flames. They seemed to glow with their own inner light. The pack bowed their heads as he walked among them. His steps were silent, his movements smooth like water. 4 men followed behind him, his guards, each nearly as big as he was, their faces hard and watchful. But the Alpha King himself looked relaxed, almost curious as he nodded to the elders and let his gaze drift over the gathered pack members. "Welcome, Alpha King Nyx," said our pack leader, an old man named Torin. "We are honored by your presence. Our fires burn bright for you tonight, and our hearts are open to your choosing." The Alpha King Nyx, they called him, smiled, showing teeth that looked just a bit too sharp. "I thank you for your welcome, pack leader Torin. The fires are indeed impressive." His voice was deep, like distant thunder, but smooth too, like the river stones I collected as a child. The drums began again, and the dance resumed. Now all eyes were on the Alpha King as he stood watching, that small smile still playing on his lips. The eligible women danced their best, their bodies swaying, their eyes downcast in respect but filled with hope. Even little Mina danced with all her heart, though she was still too young for mating. I leaned forward slightly, trying to see better around the edge of the fire. My foot slipped on a loose stone, and I had to grab a nearby tree to steady myself. The movement must have caught his attention, because suddenly, through the veil of smoke and flames, the Alpha King's eyes found mine. Time seemed to stop. The drums faded to a distant hum. The dancers blurred into smudges of color and motion. There was only his gaze, piercing through the darkness, seeing past my soot-stained clothes and wild, unkempt hair, seeing me, really seeing me. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Something passed between us in that long moment, a question, maybe, or a recognition. I felt naked under his stare, as if he could see all the way down to my soul, to the fire that burned inside me that was so much like the ones I tended. Then someone called his name, breaking the spell. The Alpha's head turned, and the connection snapped like a dry twig. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. Without thinking, I turned and fled, slipping away into the darkness beyond the fire's light. I ran all the way to my small hut at the edge of the forest, far from the others. My home was tiny, just one room with a bed, a table, and a small fireplace. But it was mine, and it was safe. I burst through the door and slammed it shut behind me, leaning against it as I tried to catch my breath. What had just happened? Why had he looked at me like that? And why had I run away? My hands shook as I lit the small candle by my bed. The tiny flame reminded me that I had left my post, abandoned my duties. The fires would be fine for a while. I had built them well, but I would have to go back soon to tend them through the night. But I couldn't go back. Not yet. Not while he was there, with those eyes that seemed to burn hotter than any fire I'd ever built. I sank down onto my bed, hugging my knees to my chest. Through my small window, I could still see the glow of the ceremonial fires in the distance. The celebration would go on until dawn, with food and drink and dancing. And somewhere in that circle of light, the Alpha King was choosing a mate from our pack. It wouldn't be me. It could never be me. Girls with the silver mark didn't get chosen for anything good. I touched the crescent shape on my collarbone, feeling its slight rise against my skin. Why was I born with this curse? Why did it make me different, unwanted? As the sounds of laughter and music drifted on the night breeze, I curled up on my bed and closed my eyes, trying not to think about amber eyes that had, for just one moment, made me feel seen. 3 nights after the mating ceremony, a storm rolled in over our village. I sat by my small hearth, listening to the rain pound against my roof like angry fists. Lightning flashed through my single window, painting the walls of my hut silver for a heartbeat before plunging back into shadow. I counted 1, 2, 3 before the thunder crashed, shaking the ground beneath my feet. The ceremony had ended without incident. The Alpha King had stayed for one night, feasted with the elders, then left without choosing a mate from our pack. The others were disappointed, but I felt only relief. His golden eyes had haunted my dreams every night since. I threw another small log onto my fire and pulled my thin blanket tighter around my shoulders. The wind howled outside, bending the trees until they creaked and groaned like old men. It was a night for monsters and magic, my mother used to say. A night when the veil between worlds grew thin. I was about to bank the fire for sleep when I heard it a pounding on my door, hard and desperate, almost lost in the storm's fury. At first, I thought it might be a branch torn loose by the wind, but then it came again, more insistent. No one ever came to see me, especially not during a storm this angry. The pack kept their distance from the silver-marked girl who could command fire. They called on me only when they needed a healer for burns or fevers, and then they left offerings outside rather than facing me directly. The pounding came once more, followed by a voice I couldn't make out. Fear and curiosity battled within me. Finally, I rose, crossed to the door, and lifted the wooden bar that kept it closed. The wind nearly tore the door from my hands as I pulled it open. Rain lashed into my face, cold and stinging. Lightning cracked overhead, illuminating the figure on my doorstep. I stumbled backward in shock, nearly falling into my hearth fire. There stood the Alpha King himself, drenched and wild-eyed. His black hair hung in wet ropes around his face, and blood ran from a deep gash across his left shoulder, mixing with the rain to stain his torn shirt crimson. But it wasn't his wound that made my heart stop, it was what he carried. In his arms was a small child, a little girl no more than 6 or 7 years old. She was pale as moonlight, her eyes closed, her tiny body shivering violently. A bruise darkened one side of her face, and her lips had a bluish tint that scared me more than the Alpha's bleeding wound. "Please," he said, his voice strained and nothing like the powerful rumble I'd heard at the ceremony. "Help us. They're hunting us. The child, she's in danger." I stood frozen, unable to think, unable to move. Everyone knew you never invited an Alpha into your home unless you were offering submission, unless you were offering yourself. And this wasn't just any Alpha, this was the Alpha King, ruler of all the packs in our territory. The little girl whimpered in his arms, a small, broken sound that cracked something open inside my chest. "Please," the Alpha King said again. "I have nowhere else to go." Lightning flashed once more, and in that instant of brightness, I saw the truth in his eyes. He was desperate. Whatever had happened, whatever danger pursued them, it was real and it was terrible. "Come in," I whispered, stepping aside. "Quickly." He ducked through my low doorway, bringing the smell of rain and blood and forest with him. I pushed the door closed against the howling wind and dropped the bar back into place. My hut suddenly felt tiny with him in it. He seemed to take up all the space, all the air. I moved around him carefully, like he was a wild animal that might bite if startled. The child in his arms moaned softly. "Put her on the bed," I said, finding my voice at last. I pointed to my small cot in the corner. "She needs to get warm and dry." He moved to the bed and laid the child down with a gentleness that surprised me. His hands, so large they could probably snap my neck without effort, arranged my blanket around her with the father's care. I busied myself at my hearth, building up the fire until it blazed bright and hot. Then I gathered my herbs and healing supplies from the shelf above my small table. When I turned back, I found the Alpha King Nyx. I remembered his name standing awkwardly in the middle of my one-room home, water pooling at his feet, blood still flowing from his shoulder. "Sit," I told him, pointing to my only chair. It seemed strange to be giving orders to the most powerful man in our territory, but he obeyed without question, lowering himself gingerly onto the wooden seat. The child was my first concern. I knelt beside the bed and placed my hand on her forehead. Her skin burned beneath my touch, hot as coals despite her shivering. Fever, and a bad one. She needs dry clothes, I said, moving to the small trunk where I kept my few belongings. I pulled out my smallest shift, knowing it would still be too big for her tiny frame. And medicine for the fever. Nix nodded, his eyes never leaving the child's face. Can you help her? There was raw fear in his voice, an emotion I never expected to hear from an Alpha King. It made him seem almost human. I'll try, I said. But first, tell me who she is, and why you're both running in a storm with hunters on your trail. He looked at me then, those golden eyes seeming to glow in the firelight. Her name is Ember. She's my niece, my brother's daughter. His voice grew hard. My brother was killed 3 days ago. The same people who murdered him now hunt for his child and for me. I absorbed this as I soaked a cloth in cool water and laid it across Ember's hot forehead. Why did you come to me? I asked, keeping my eyes on my work. Surely the Alpha King has allies more powerful than a pack outcast. Because you bear the silver crescent, he said simply. My hand flew to my collarbone, covering the mark that had made me an outcast all my life. You're a healer, not an outcast, he continued, his voice softer now. They lied to you all these years. I shook my head, unwilling to believe him. The mark is bad luck. Everyone knows that. No, he said firmly. That's what they want you to think. The silver mark is a sign of power, rare power. You can do things others can't, like heal those who cannot heal themselves. I stared at him, my mind racing. Could it be true? Had my whole life been built on a lie? But why would the pack elders push me aside if my gift was valuable? The child, Ember, moaned again, drawing my attention back to her. Questions about my mark would have to wait. Right now, she needed me. She's burning with fever, I said, feeling her pulse flutter like a trapped bird beneath my fingertips. And there's something else wrong, something deeper. Nix leaned forward, wincing as the movement pulled at his wounded shoulder. She hasn't spoken since they killed her father. She saw it happen. His voice broke. She's been fading since then, growing weaker even though she has no physical wounds beyond that bruise. A broken heart. Those were always the hardest to heal. I'd seen it before in our pack. Those who lost mates or children sometimes simply gave up living. I need to make a healing tea, I said, rising and moving to my herbs. And then I'll look at your shoulder. My wound can wait, he said. Help her first. I nodded and set to work, crushing dried herbs between my fingers, releasing their sharp green scent into the air. Feverfew for the fever, valerian to help her sleep, rose hips for strength, and a pinch of rare star moss that I'd gathered under the full moon. I added the mixture to a pot of water and hung it over the fire to steep. While it brewed, I returned to Ember and carefully removed her wet clothes, replacing them with my dry shift. It hung like a tent on her small frame, but it was warm. Her skin was mottled with goosebumps, and I could count each rib beneath her pale skin. How long had it been since she'd eaten? There's bread in the basket on the table, I told Nix without looking up. And cheese. You should eat. Not until she does, he replied stubbornly. I sighed. Alphas and their pride. You'll do her no good if you collapse from hunger or blood loss. Before he could argue further, a cry of terror tore from Ember's throat. Her eyes flew open, eyes the same amber gold as her uncle's, and she began to thrash against the blankets, caught in some nightmare vision. Papa! She screamed. Papa, run! Nix was beside the bed in an instant, gathering her into his arms despite his injured shoulder. Shh, little spark, he murmured against her hair. I'm here. You're safe. But she didn't seem to hear him. Her eyes were open but unseeing, fixed on horrors only she could see. I hurried back to the fire and poured some of the healing tea into a cup, adding a spoonful of honey to mask the bitter taste. "Hold her steady," I told Nix as I returned to the bedside. "She needs to drink this." Together, we managed to get most of the tea into her, though some spilled down her chin. Gradually, her struggles weakened, and her eyes began to focus. She saw Nix first, recognition dawning in her fever-bright eyes. "Uncle?" she whispered, her voice rough from screaming. "I'm here, little spark," he said, his relief palpable. "We're safe now." Her eyes drifted to me, wary and confused. "Who are you?" "This is," Nix began, then stopped, looking at me uncertainly. I realized he didn't know my name. "Sorry," I supplied. "My name is Sorry." "Sari is helping us," Nix told the child. "She's a healer." Ember's eyes moved to my collarbone, where my dress had slipped, to reveal the silver crescent. "You have the moon mark," she said, like in the old stories. Before I could ask what story she meant, her eyes slid closed, the tea finally taking effect. Her breathing evened out, and some of the tension left her small body. Nix laid her gently back on the bed, tucking the blanket around her. Only then did he let himself sink back into the chair, his face gray with pain and exhaustion. "Now," I said firmly, gathering fresh cloths and my healing salve, "let me see that shoulder." He didn't protest this time, only nodded and began to carefully peel off his torn, bloodied shirt. The wound was deep, a clean slice from what must have been a very sharp blade. It ran from just above his collarbone down across his shoulder, narrowly missing the major veins in his neck. "You were lucky," I said as I cleaned the wound with water and herb-infused spirits. "An inch to the left, and you wouldn't have made it to my door." He hissed through his teeth at the sting but didn't pull away. "Luck had nothing to do with it," he said grimly. "I knew exactly where your hut was. I've been watching you since the ceremony." My hands froze in their work, my heart suddenly pounding. "Watching me? Why?" Those golden eyes met mine, steady and certain. "Because I knew I would need you. I just didn't know how soon." For 7 days and nights we stayed in my tiny hut while Ember fought her fever. The storm raged for 3 of those days, as if the sky itself shared our worry for the small child who tossed and turned on my bed. I slept on the floor by the hearth, while Nix kept watch from the chair or paced the small space when his restless energy became too much to contain. On the 2nd day, Ember's fever rose so high that her skin felt like touching a cooking pot. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps, and she cried out for her father in her sleep. I bathed her burning skin with cool water and made poultice after poultice from the herbs I gathered in the forest. Nix refused to leave her side, even to eat, until I forced a bowl of broth into his hands. "You can't help her if you grow weak yourself," I told him firmly. "Eat." He looked at me with surprise, not used to being given orders. But he took the bowl and drank, his eyes never leaving Ember's face. By the 4th day, the fever broke. Ember opened her eyes, clear and aware for the first time since they arrived. She still didn't speak much, just watched us with those golden eyes that held too much sadness for a child. "The worst is past," I told Nix as we sat at my small table, sharing a simple meal of bread and dried meat. "Her body is healing, but her heart," I trailed off, not knowing how to finish. "Her heart will take longer," he finished for me. "She saw things no child should see." I nodded, studying him across the flickering candle between us. His wound was healing well, faster than a normal man's would. But there were shadows under his eyes from nights spent watching over Ember, and new lines on his face that hadn't been there at the mating ceremony. "Tell me what happened," I said softly. "You said your brother was murdered." Nix was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing patterns in the wood grain of my table. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. My brother, Rowan, was next in line for the throne after me. He was a good man, kind and fair. He had many friends. His face darkened, and, it seems, many enemies. 3 nights ago, after I left your village, I received word that Rowan and his mate had been attacked in their own home. By the time I reached them, they were gone. Only Ember remained, hiding in a small space beneath the floorboards where her father had put her. He closed his eyes, pain etched into every line of his face. She saw it all through the cracks in the wood. My heart squeezed tight in my chest at the thought of the little girl, trapped and terrified, watching her parents die. "Who did it?" I asked. "The Council of Elders," Nyx replied, his voice hardening. "Or at least, some among them. They've grown corrupt, hungry for power. They spread lies about those with the silver mark, making them outcasts when they should be honored. And now they've turned to murder to get what they want. What do they want? Control. Power." His golden eyes met mine across the table. They fear what they can't control, and they can't control those born with the silver mark. Like you, I touched my crescent mark absently, still trying to make sense of all he'd told me. "But why kill your brother?" "Because he found proof of their lies in the ancient scrolls. Proof that those with the mark were once revered, not feared. He was going to expose them." Nyx's hand formed a fist on the table. "Now they hunt Ember because she is his blood, and me because I know the truth." I sat back, my mind whirling. Could it really be true? Had I spent my whole life as an outcast because of lies? Why would they make us outcast if we have power? I asked, still not fully believing. Because together, an alpha and a silver-marked mate are too powerful to control, Nyx said simply. They feared that most of all. The word mate made my cheeks grow warm, and I looked away, busying myself with clearing our plates. The idea that someone like Nyx could see someone like me as a possible mate was too strange to consider. As the days passed, Ember grew stronger. She began to eat more, and color returned to her cheeks. She still spoke little, but she no longer cried out in her sleep quite as often. Nyx's wound healed to a thin red line, then to a pale scar that would soon fade completely, and slowly something changed between us. It began with small things. Nyx would catch my hand as I passed him a cup of tea, his fingers lingering against mine a moment too long. I would find him watching me as I worked, those golden eyes thoughtful and intense. We took turns reading to Ember from my small collection of stolen books, our voices filling my hut with tales of adventure and courage. One night, as Ember slept peacefully for the first time, Nyx and I sat beside the fire, talking in low voices. "You said you understand fire," he said, remembering our conversation from days before. "What did you mean by that?" I hesitated, then looked up at him. "I mean, I really understand it. Not just how to build it and keep it burning. I understand its nature." "Show me," he said softly. I hesitated again. Since childhood, I'd hidden my deepest secret, the way flames would appear in my hand without burning me, the way I could shape them with my thoughts. I'd shown no one, not even my mother before she died. The pack already thought I was cursed, if they knew the full truth. But Nyx wasn't looking at me with fear or disgust. His eyes held only genuine interest, maybe even a kind of hope. Slowly, I held out my palm. I focused my thoughts, feeling for that warm spark that always lived in my chest. A small flame bloomed above my skin, dancing and flickering with my heartbeat. It cast a gentle glow over our faces, turning Nyx's golden eyes to molten amber. Instead of recoiling in fear, he leaned closer, fascinated. "This is why they feared you," he said, his voice full of wonder. "Not because you're cursed, but because you're powerful." I closed my fingers over the flame, extinguishing it. "I've never shown anyone before," I admitted. "I was afraid they would drive me out completely if they knew." "They wouldn't have driven you out," Nick said, his face suddenly grim. They would have done worse. The council would have taken you, used your power for their own ends. A chill ran down my spine at his words. Is that what they did to others like me? He nodded slowly. Some. Others they simply made into outcasts, hoping their gifts would never awaken. His eyes burned into mine. But you awakened yours anyway. I didn't know it was a gift, I said softly. I thought it was just another part of my curse. That night, as Ember slept, Nyx told me about his own burdens, the weight of leadership that had fallen on his shoulders when his father died, the constant power struggles among the pack alphas, the loneliness of his position, never knowing who to trust. I trust you, he said, so quietly I almost didn't hear him. I don't know why. Perhaps it's because you had every reason to turn us away that night, but you didn't. I felt something warm bloom in my chest that had nothing to do with my fire magic. I trust you too, I replied. I'm not sure when that happened. He smiled, and for a moment, he didn't look like the fearsome Alpha King at all. He looked like a man, tired but hopeful. The next morning, I showed Nyx my secret treasures, books I'd collected over the years, stealing them from traders who passed through our village. Drawings I'd made of places I'd read about but never seen, mountains taller than clouds, oceans that stretched forever, cities full of people and wonders. I've never been further than the next village, I told him as he carefully turned the pages of my drawings. But someday, I want to see the world beyond our territory. You will, he promised, his finger tracing the outline of a mountain I'd drawn. When this is over, when we're safe, I'll show you all of these places myself. When we're safe, I repeated, trying not to think too hard about what we meant. Did he include me in his future plans? Or was he just being kind to the healer who had helped his niece? As the afternoon sun slanted through my small window, Ember woke from her nap and padded over to where we sat at the table. For the first time since she arrived, she looked truly present, her eyes bright and aware. I'm hungry, she announced, climbing onto a stool. Nyx and I exchanged a startled glance, then broke into matching smiles. It was the most she'd said at once since coming to my hut. What would you like to eat, little Spark? Nyx asked, his voice gentle. Ember considered this seriously. Honey bread, she decided. And berries, if there are any. I have both, I said, rising to get them. And we can go pick fresh berries tomorrow, if you're feeling strong enough. As I set the food before her, Ember looked up at me, her small face solemn. Thank you for making me better, she said, and for letting us stay in your house. Something in my heart melted at her simple gratitude. You're welcome to stay as long as you need, I told her, and I meant it. That evening, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and pink, I sat on the small bench outside my hut, watching Ember chase fireflies in the clearing. Nyx joined me, his arm brushing mine as he Saturday. She's healing, he said, watching his niece with soft eyes. Yes, I agreed. Children are stronger than we think. She'll carry the scars, but she'll heal. Thanks to you, he said, turning to look at me. The sunset painted his face in warm gold, highlighting the sharp angles of his cheekbones, the strong line of his jaw. This close, I could see flecks of darker amber in his golden eyes, like tiny flames. I've never told anyone those things, I confessed, looking away from his intense gaze. About the fire, about my dreams of seeing the world. Nor have I, he replied, his fingers tentatively reaching for mine across the bench between us. About the burdens of leadership, the loneliness. When his fingers touched mine, it felt like lightning striking earth, sudden and powerful and somehow right. A connection that had been waiting to happen, perhaps for years. We sat like that until the stars came out, hand in hand, watching Ember play in the soft evening light. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like an outcast. I felt like I belonged somewhere, or maybe to someone. "I've never had a family," I said quietly, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Nix's hand tightened around mine. "Perhaps it's time you did," he said. Dawn broke with the sound of howling. Not wolves, but men who could become them. I knew that sound all pack children learn it early. It's the hunting call, used when tracking prey through the forests. But this time, we were the prey. I was already awake, heating water for tea, when the first howl split the quiet morning. My hands froze mid-task. Nix appeared in the doorway of my hut, his body tense as a drawn bow. He had been checking the perimeter, as he did every morning. His eyes met mine, and no words were needed. "They've found us," he growled, his voice rough with anger and fear. His body began to change, muscles shifting beneath his skin, his fingers lengthening into claws. Not a full shift to wolf form, but enough to fight if needed. "Stay with Ember." The little girl was still asleep on my bed, her face peaceful for the first time in days. I looked at her, then back to Nix, and something fierce and protective flared in my chest. "No," I said, setting down the water pot. "This is my home, my territory." I grabbed his arm as he turned to go. "Let me help." He hesitated, his golden eyes searching my face. Then he nodded once, sharply. "Stay behind me." We stepped outside together into the pale morning light. The air was cool and crisp, heavy with dew and the scent of pine. Birds had gone silent at the hunting calls, and the forest beyond my clearing seemed to hold its breath. 5 warriors stood at the edge of the trees. They were all in half-shift form like Nix, their bodies larger than human, their faces pulled into something between man and wolf. Each wore the marks of the council painted on their bare chests, 5 vertical lines in blood red. "Step aside, fire tender," their leader called to me. He was the largest of them, with a scar running from his temple to his chin. "We've come for the false alpha and the child. The council has declared them traitors." I felt something stir within me, a heat that had nothing to do with my gift. These men had come to my home, threatened people under my care. A week ago, I would have cowered, accepting whatever the council decreed. But something had changed in me during these days with Nix and Ember. I was done hiding. "This is my territory," I declared, letting flames appear around my hands. Not small, controlled flames like I had shown Nix, but roaring, angry fire that cast my shadow large behind me. "You are not welcome here." The warriors hesitated. They had expected a meek outcast, easy to push aside. Not this, a woman wreathed in fire, standing tall beside an alpha king. "The girl bears the mark of the moon," one of them whispered to their leader. "The silver curse." "She's just a fire tender," the leader snapped back, but I heard the doubt in his voice. "The council said she would be no trouble." Nix stepped forward, placing himself slightly in front of me. "Tell the council that Nix, true alpha king of the Northern Territories, knows what they have done," he called out. "Tell them I have seen the ancient scrolls. I know the truth about the silver marked, and I will return to claim justice for my brother's murder." The leader snarled, showing teeth too long and sharp for a human mouth. "You'll return only in chains, false king. The council rules now." He gestured to his men. "Take them. Kill the outcast if she resists." They advanced into the clearing, spreading out to surround us. I felt fear rise in my throat, sharp as a blade. These were trained warriors, killers. What was I but a lonely outcast who tended fires? But then I felt Nix beside me, solid as stone, fierce as a storm. And I thought of Ember, sleeping inside, trusting us to keep her safe. My fear didn't vanish, but it changed, hardened into something I could use. "Stay close to me," Nix murmured. Then he moved, faster than my eyes could follow, launching himself at the nearest warrior. The clearing exploded into chaos. Nix was a blur of motion, his claws slashing, his body twisting to avoid the blows aimed at him. 2 warriors fell back, blood streaming from wounds on their chests. But the other 3 pressed forward, trying to get past him to me, to the hut where Ember slept. I couldn't fight like Nyx. I had no claws, no super strength, but I had fire. I pushed my hands forward, and flames roared from my palms in a great wave. The grass at the warriors' feet caught fire, forcing them to leap back. I made the flames dance higher, forming a wall between my hut and the attackers. "Witch!" one of them screamed, his face twisted with fear. "She's a demon!" The leader wasn't so easily frightened. He leaped through a gap in my firewall, landing just feet from me. His claws slashed at my face, and I barely managed to duck in time. I stumbled backward, losing control of my flames as I tried to keep my balance. He smiled, showing all his teeth, and lunged for me again. I raised my hands in defense, knowing it wouldn't be enough. But his claws never reached me. Nyx appeared between us, catching the warrior's arm in mid-strike. There was a sickening crack as Nyx twisted, breaking the man's arm as easily as snapping a twig. The warrior howled in pain, but Nyx wasn't finished. He lifted the man by his throat, his golden eyes blazing with a fury I had never seen before. "She is under my protection," he roared, "as is this land and all who dwell here." He threw the warrior back toward his companions, with such force that the man skidded 10 feet across the clearing, leaving a trail in the dirt. The other warriors backed away, helping their fallen leader to his feet. Even injured, they could have kept fighting. There were still 5 of them against our 2. But something had changed in the way they looked at us, at me. Fear, not just of Nyx, the Alpha King, but of me, the fire tender, the silver-marked outcast who commanded flames. "The council will hear of this," the leader gasped, holding his broken arm against his chest. "They will send more, many more. Let them come," Nyx replied, his voice deadly calm now. "And let them fall one by one until they learn. The old ways are returning. The silver-marked will take their rightful place again." The warriors retreated, dragging their wounded with them. The leader gave us one last hateful glance before disappearing into the trees. Their howls faded as they ran, changing from hunting calls to retreat signals. For a long moment, Nyx and I stood in silence, the only sound our heavy breathing and the crackle of the fires still burning in patches around the clearing. Then he turned to me, his eyes wide with something like wonder. "You fought for us," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You could have let them take us, saved yourself from the council's wrath, but you fought." I looked down at my hands. The flames were gone, but I could still feel their heat in my blood, the power that had flowed through me. "They came to my home," I said simply. "They threatened what's mine." Nyx's eyes darkened at my words. He took a step toward me, then another, until he stood so close I could feel the heat radiating from his skin. "And what is yours, Sari?" Before I could answer, a small voice called from the doorway of my hut. "Uncle Nyx? Sorry? Where are you?" Ember stood there, sleep-tousled and confused, her golden eyes wide as she took in the burned patches of grass, the scent of blood in the air. "What happened?" she asked. "Did the bad men come?" Nyx was at her side in an instant, kneeling down to her level. "Yes, little spark. But they're gone now. Sari and I sent them away." Ember looked past him to me, then at the scorched earth around us. "Did you make fire?" I nodded, unsure what she would think of me now that she'd seen evidence of my power. To my surprise, a smile bloomed on her face, the first real smile I'd seen from her. "Like in the stories," she said, "the silver-marked queen who commanded the flames. Papa told me those stories." I glanced at Nyx, confused. He stood up, taking Ember's hand. "My brother kept the old stories alive," he explained. "The true history, not the lies the council spread." He taught Ember about the Silver-Marked and their gifts. I didn't know there were stories about people like me, I said, joining them at the door of my hut. I thought I was alone. Ember shook her head firmly. You're not alone. You're like the queens in the stories. She looked up at her uncle. Can Sari be our family now, since Mama and Papa are gone? Nyx's eyes met mine over Ember's head. There was a question in them, and something deeper, something that made my heart beat faster. Let's go inside, he said gently to Ember. We need to talk about what happens next. Inside my hut, I made tea while Nyx and Ember sat at the table. The little girl seemed to have gained strength from the excitement. She sat up straight, looking from Nyx to me and back again, waiting for answers. The council will send more warriors, Nyx said, wrapping his hands around his teacup. We can't stay here much longer. It puts Sari in too much danger. Where will we go? Ember asked, her bottom lip trembling slightly. Nyx hesitated, then reached across the table to take her small hand in his. You and I must return to face the council. I need to claim my rightful place as Alpha King and expose their lies. It's the only way to keep us all safe. And Sari? Ember looked at me, her eyes filling with tears. She has to come too. She's family now. Nyx's gaze turned to me, his expression unreadable. That's for Sari to decide, he said quietly. I looked around my tiny hut. This had been my home, my safe place for years. Yet in just a week, it had changed. It wasn't just mine anymore. It had become ours, mine and Nyx's and Ember's. The thought of them leaving, of returning to my solitary life as a fire tender, made my chest ache. But to go with them meant facing the council, fighting, perhaps even dying. Before I could speak, a sound caught my attention, horses approaching, moving fast. Nyx heard it too, his head snapping up, his body tensing again. They've returned already? I whispered, fear coiling in my stomach. Nyx moved to the window, peering out through the shutters. His body relaxed slightly. Not the warriors, a messenger. He turned back to us. One of mine, from the North Pack. He opened the door and stepped outside. I kept Ember behind me as I followed, still wary after our earlier fight. A young man on a lathered horse stood in my clearing. He wore the symbol of the North Pack, a howling wolf beneath a crown on his leather vest. When he saw Nyx, he dismounted quickly and dropped to one knee. My king, he said, his voice breathless from hard riding. I bring urgent news. Nyx motioned for him to rise. Speak, Tomas. The council has declared you dead, Tomas said. They claim you were killed by rogues while traveling. They've set the date for choosing a new Alpha King 3 days from now. Nyx's face hardened, his eyes turning cold. And my brother's murder? They say he died trying to protect you, Tomas replied. They're calling him a hero now, to win favor with the packs who were loyal to him. I felt sick at their lies, at how easily they rewrote the truth to suit their goals. Beside me, Ember's small hand slipped into mine, squeezing tight. There's more, Tomas continued. They're hunting the child, your niece. They say she's the last of your bloodline, that she must be found and protected. The way he said the last word made it clear that protection was the last thing the council had in mind for Ember. Nyx was silent for a long moment, his face still as stone but his eyes burning. Then he looked at me, and I saw the decision in his eyes before he spoke. We leave at nightfall, he said. All of us. The time for hiding is over. Where will we go? I asked, thinking of the few belongings I would need to pack. To the North Pack first, Nyx replied, to gather my loyal followers. And then, his eyes gleamed with fierce determination, to the High Council chambers, to take back what's mine and to right the wrongs done to the Silver-Marked. He turned to the messenger. Tomas, return to the North Pack. Tell them their king lives and will return by tomorrow's moon. Tell them to prepare for war. As Tomas rode away, Nyx came to stand before me. He took my free hand. the one not holding embers, in both of his. "I won't ask you to come with us," he said softly. "This is my fight, not yours. You've already done more than I had any right to ask." I looked down at Ember, who stared back with hopeful eyes. Then I looked around at my clearing, at the home I had made for myself, on the edges of a pack that never truly wanted me. "You fought for us," I said, echoing his words from earlier. "Now I'll fight for you." I met his golden eyes without flinching. "This is my fight too. The council made it mine when they lied about the silver mark, when they made me an outcast in my own home." Something like joy flashed across Nyx's face, quickly hidden behind his warrior's mask. But I had seen it, and it warmed me from within like my own fire. "Then we stand together," he said, "against whatever comes." Ember tugged on our joined hands. "The three of us," she said firmly. "A family, a family." The word echoed in my mind as we returned to the hut to prepare for our journey. I had never thought to have one of my own. Yet here it was, forming around me like one of my fires, bright and dangerous and beautiful. We left my little hut as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I took one last look at the only home I had ever known, the small garden I had tended, the herbs hanging from the rafters, the hearth where I had controlled my first flame. It wasn't much, but it had been mine, and now I was leaving it behind. I had few possessions to pack: some clothes, my healing herbs, my precious books and drawings. Everything fit into a single bag that Nyx carried for me, though I protested I could manage it myself. "Save your strength," he said. "We have a long journey ahead." Ember walked between us, her small hand in mine. She seemed stronger now, her steps sure, though her face was solemn. She understood more than a child her age should have to understand about danger, about loss, about having to leave safety behind. "Will we come back?" she asked me, looking over her shoulder at my hut growing smaller in the distance. "I don't know, little one," I answered honestly. "But we'll be together, and that's what matters." We traveled through the night, staying off the main paths. Nyx moved like a shadow, alert to every sound, every scent on the wind. I followed his lead, teaching Ember to place her feet carefully so they wouldn't snap twigs or rustle leaves. She learned quickly, her golden eyes wide in the darkness. By dawn, we had reached the border of my pack's territory. I had never crossed it before, and I hesitated at the invisible line only I seemed to see. Beyond was a world I knew only from my stolen books and wild dreams. Nyx noticed my pause. "Are you afraid?" he asked gently. "Yes," I admitted, but not enough to turn back. He smiled then, a rare, warm smile that reached his eyes. "Good. The brave aren't those who feel no fear. They're the ones who go forward anyway." We made camp in a small cave as the sun rose. Ember fell asleep almost instantly, curled on a bed of pine boughs we had gathered. Nyx took first watch while I rested, but sleep wouldn't come. My mind was too full of the day's events, of the decision I had made to leave everything I knew. "You should rest," Nyx said, noticing my open eyes. "We still have far to go." "I can't," I replied. "Every time I close my eyes, I see those warriors coming back. I see the council finding us. I stopped, unable to voice my deepest fear, that I would fail to protect Ember, that Nyx would be killed, that I would end up alone again. He moved to sit beside me, his shoulder touching mine. "I won't let anything happen to you," he promised, "or to Ember." "It's not me I'm worried about," I said. "It's you, both of you. I just found this." I gestured vaguely at the space between us. "Whatever this is, I don't want to lose it." Nyx was silent for a moment. Then his hand found mine in the dim light of the cave. "You won't lose us, Sari. No matter what happens with the council, the three of us stay together now." His words should have comforted me, But a new worry gnawed at my heart. And when you're Alpha King again? When you have your throne back and your power? Will there still be room for a fire tender in your life? His golden eyes seemed to glow in the shadows. You are not just a fire tender. You never were. His fingers tightened around mine. And when I am Alpha King again, I will need someone strong by my side. Someone who understands both fire and healing. Someone who isn't afraid to fight for what's hers. The way he looked at me made my heart beat faster and slower at the same time. If such a thing were possible, I wanted to believe him. I wanted to trust that this strange, new happiness could last beyond our journey, beyond the danger we faced. But life had taught me that good things don't last, that people leave, that I would always end up alone. We reached the North Pack lands by the next evening. I had never seen anything like it, a real pack village, with solid wooden houses instead of huts, with streets and a central meeting hall. And everywhere, people. More people than I had ever seen in one place. They greeted Nix with joy and relief, dropping to one knee when he approached, calling him my king, with real love in their voices. News of his death had hit them hard. To see him alive brought tears to many eyes. I hung back, keeping Ember close to me, suddenly aware of my worn clothes, my wild hair, the silver mark on my collarbone that was visible above my dress. I didn't belong here, among these proud wolf shifters. I was still just an outcast, a fire tender. But then Nix turned, searching the crowd until he found me. He held out his hand, beckoning me forward. With hesitant steps, I joined him, Ember still clutching my skirts. "This is Sari," he announced to the gathered pack. "She saved my life and Ember's. She fought the council's warriors with courage and power. She bears the silver mark, and she stands with us." A murmur ran through the crowd. Some looked curious, others wary, but no one challenged Nix's words. No one called me cursed or pushed me away. It was a strange feeling to be introduced as someone of value, someone worthy of notice. We were given a house near the center of the village, a real house, with separate rooms and solid walls and a proper bed. Ember ran from room to room, excited by the space after the cramped quarters of my hut. I stood in the doorway, overwhelmed by this sudden change in my fortunes. "Is this really where we'll stay?" I asked Nix. "For now," he replied, "until we're ready to face the council." That night, after Ember was asleep in her own room, a luxury she couldn't stop talking about, Nix and I sat before the fireplace in the main room. The flames danced merrily, and I found myself moving them with my thoughts, making shapes for my own amusement. A wolf running, a tree growing, a little girl dancing. "Your control is impressive," Nix observed. "Did anyone teach you?" I shook my head. "I learned alone, in secret." He leaned forward, the firelight casting half his face in shadow. "Tomorrow I meet with my war chiefs. We'll plan our move against the council. I want you there." I blinked in surprise. "Me? But I know nothing of war or strategy." "You know the council's lies. You've lived with them your whole life." His eyes were serious. "And you have power they fear, power we might need." I stared into the fire, watching the shapes I had made dissolve back into ordinary flames. "I'm not a warrior, Nix. I'm a healer, a tender of fires." "You're more than that," he insisted. "You proved it when you fought for us." But a cold fear was growing in my stomach. I had left my hut, my territory, for this man and the child who had claimed my heart. I had thought we would find safety here, at least for a while. Not immediate plans for war. "I don't want Ember anywhere near a battle," I said firmly. "She's been through enough." "Of course not," Nix agreed. "She would stay here, protected by the pack. And if you fall in this battle, what happens to her then?" My voice cracked on the words. "What happens to me?" Nix was silent, the question hanging in the air between us. Finally, he spoke. "If I fall, The North Pack has orders to take you both far away, beyond the Council's reach. You would be safe. Safe, but without you," I said softly. He moved from his chair to kneel before me, taking both my hands in his. "Sorry, look at me." I did, reluctantly meeting those golden eyes that had first caught mine across a ceremonial fire. "I have to do this, not just for revenge for my brother, though I won't lie and say I don't want that, but for all the silver-marked who have been cast out, lied about, hunted, for you, for the future." I understood. Of course I did. But understanding didn't make the fear any less. "When do you leave?" I asked, already knowing I wouldn't like the answer. 2 days, he said. "We must move before the Council names a new Alpha King. Once that happens, it will be much harder to regain control." 2 days. So little time when I had just begun to know what it felt like to have a family, to belong somewhere, to someone. "I'll come with you to the War Council tomorrow," I said, "but I make no promises beyond that." He nodded, accepting this. "Thank you." He rose, still holding my hands, and pulled me gently to my feet. For a moment, we stood close, his warmth mingling with mine. Then he stepped back. "You should rest. Tomorrow will be a long day." I watched him go to his own room, feeling a different kind of ache than I had known before. Not the pain of rejection or isolation, but the pain of caring too much, of having something precious that could be lost. The War Council the next day was like nothing I had ever experienced. 10 of Nyx's most trusted warriors gathered in a room behind the main hall, their faces grim as they discussed strategies and alliances. I sat quietly beside Nyx, listening and learning. The situation was worse than I had thought. The Council had already gathered its forces at the High Temple, where the choosing of the new Alpha King would take place. They had spread rumors about Nyx's death throughout the territories, ensuring that many who might have supported him now believed him gone. "We are outnumbered," said Kira, a fierce female warrior with scars on both arms. "Even with the Western Pack's support, we cannot win in open battle." "Then we don't fight in the open," Nyx replied. "We go in small groups, infiltrate the temple before the ceremony, and strike when they least expect it." The discussion continued for hours, plans made and discarded, arguments rising and falling. Through it all, Nyx remained calm, listening to all sides before making decisions. I saw in him the leader he truly was: fair, thoughtful, but resolute. And I knew, with a sinking heart, that he would go through with this plan no matter the risk. It was who he was. It was why his people loved him. That night, after another war council that lasted until the stars were bright in the sky, Nyx found me sitting alone on the porch of our borrowed house. Ember had gone to bed hours before, exhausted from playing with the Pack children all day. "You're troubled," he said, sitting beside me on the wooden step. I looked up at the moon, nearly full now. "I'm scared," I admitted. "I've only just found you and Ember, only just discovered that I'm not cursed, that my power is a gift, and now I'm leaving." He finished when I couldn't. "Yes." He was quiet for a long moment. "I wish things were different. I wish we had met in times of peace, that I could court you properly, that we could build something slowly, together." The word court made my cheeks warm. "Would you have courted me, I mean, if things were different?" His smile was sad and sweet at the same time. "From the moment I saw you across the ceremonial fire, I knew you were different. Special. And when you helped us, when you fought for us." He reached out to trace the silver crescent on my collarbone with gentle fingers. "Yes, sorry. I would have courted you with all the patience and devotion you deserve." My heart felt too big for my chest, full of hope and fear, and something else I was afraid to name. "Then come back to us," I whispered. "Whatever happens at the temple, promise you'll come back." He cupped my face in his hands, his golden eyes serious. I promise to try with every breath in my body, but, Sari, if I don't. Don't say it, I interrupted. Please. He nodded, understanding. Then, slowly, giving me time to pull away if I wanted, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to mine. The kiss was gentle, a question more than a demand. I answered by moving closer, my hands finding their way to his shoulders. When we parted, I saw in his eyes the same wonder I felt. Whatever this was between us, it was real and rare and worth fighting for. Come back to me, I said again. To us. I will, he promised, or die trying. The morning of his departure dawned clear and cold. The North Pack warriors were gathered in the central square, 50 strong, armed and ready. Ember clung to Nyx, her small arms wrapped around his neck as he knelt to say goodbye. Be brave, little spark, he told her. Mind what Sari tells you. I'll return as soon as I can. Promise? Ember asked, tears streaming down her face. I promise, he replied, though we all knew it was a promise he might not be able to keep. Then it was my turn. We stood facing each other, neither quite knowing what to say. Around us, warriors were mounting horses, checking weapons, saying their own goodbyes to loved ones. Keep her safe, Nyx said at last. And yourself. I will, I promised. And you remember what's waiting for you here. He pulled me close then, not caring who saw. I'll remember, he whispered against my hair. Every moment, every step of the way, I'll remember. Then he was gone, mounting his black horse, raising his hand in a final salute to the village that had sheltered him. The war party thundered out of the square, their hoofbeats fading into the distance. Ember's small hand found mine, squeezing tight. He'll come back, she said with a child's fierce faith. He promised. I looked down at her tear-stained face, seeing in it the same stubborn hope I was trying to hold on to. Yes, I agreed, though my heart was breaking. He promised. We stood there long after the dust had settled, long after the others had returned to their homes and duties. Just the two of us, a healer and a child, waiting for our alpha to return. A month passed, then 2. The leaves on the trees turned golden, then red, then fell to carpet the ground in a rustling blanket of brown. The North Pack village prepared for winter, storing food, making warm clothes, reinforcing homes against the coming cold. Through it all, Ember and I waited for news, for a messenger, for Nyx himself to return. None came. Ember thrived despite the uncertainty. She made friends among the Pack children, who were fascinated by her status as the Alpha King's niece. She grew inches in those months, her face losing some of its baby roundness. I taught her about herbs and healing, and she showed a natural talent for it. At night, I would tell her stories, some from my books, some made up on the spot, and watch her golden eyes, so like her uncle's, grow heavy with sleep. Tell me again about the silver-marked queens, she would ask night after night. And I would, weaving tales from the fragments Nyx had shared, filling in the gaps with my own imagination. Stories of powerful women who commanded the elements, who stood beside Alpha Kings as equals, who brought balance to the packs. And we'll be like that, Ember would say sleepily. You and me and Uncle Nyx, when he comes home. Yes, I would agree, tucking the blankets around her small body. When he comes home. But as the days grew shorter and the nights colder, a shadow of doubt grew in my heart. What if he wasn't coming back? What if the council had been too strong, their warriors too many? What if Nyx, my fierce, golden-eyed alpha, lay cold and still somewhere far from home? I kept these fears from Ember. During the day, I worked in the Pack's healing hut, using my knowledge of herbs to treat illnesses and injuries. The Pack members had been wary of me at first, eyeing my silver crescent with generations of ingrained suspicion. But as I healed their children's fevers, eased their elders' joint pains, and mended their hunters' wounds, they began to accept me. Some even sought me out specifically, whispering that my healing touch was stronger than the regular pack healers. Word spread. Those with stubborn ailments or serious injuries would ask for the silver-marked healer, their eyes both fearful and hopeful as I approached. I made a place for us in this new community, Ember and I. Not quite belonging, but not outcasts either. We were the Alpha King's charges, protected by his orders, respected for our connection to him. It was more acceptance than I had ever known, yet still I felt like a visitor, waiting for my real life to resume when Nyx returned. If he returned. The first snow fell on the day the council's messengers came. I was in our house, teaching Ember how to braid small healing sachets to hang from the rafters, when the warning horns sounded from the village walls. 3 long blasts, unknown visitors approaching. Ember's head snapped up, her eyes wide. Is it Uncle Nyx? I don't know, I said, but hope flared in my chest like one of my flames. Stay here, I'll go see. Outside, villagers were gathering in the central square. I pushed through the crowd, trying to see what was happening. Kira, the female warrior who had stayed behind to lead the pack in Nyx's absence, stood on the steps of the meeting hall, her face grim as she watched 3 riders approach. They were not Nyx or his warriors. These men wore the red and black colors of the council, their horses glossy and well-fed, their armor gleaming in the weak winter Sunday. My hope withered and died, leaving a cold emptiness in its place. I bring a message from the High Council, the lead rider announced when they reached the square. He was older than the others, with silver streaking his dark hair and lines around his eyes. For all pack territories. Kira's stance was wary, one hand resting on the knife at her hip. Speak your message then. The messenger unrolled a scroll, his voice carrying clearly through the hushed square as he read. The High Council of Alphas hereby declares Nyx, former Alpha King of the Northern Territories, to be outlaw and traitor. Any who shelter him or his supporters shall share in his punishment. Furthermore, the child known as Ember, daughter of the traitor Rowan, is hereby placed under the council's protection. She is to be surrendered immediately to council custody for her own safety and proper upbringing. Murmurs ran through the crowd. I felt as if the ground had dropped away beneath my feet. They were coming for Ember. They had declared Nyx a traitor, not dead, which meant, does the former Alpha King still live? Kira asked, her voice steady, despite the bombshell this news represented. The messenger's lips curled in what might have been a smile. He lives, for now. He and his rebel forces have been captured and await the council's justice. Alive. Nyx was alive. The relief that flooded me was so intense it nearly brought me to my knees, but it was short-lived, replaced almost immediately by fresh fear. Captured, awaiting justice, which from the council would mean only one thing: execution. And the child? Kira pressed. What claim does the council have on her? She is of royal blood, the messenger replied smoothly. The last of her line. It is the council's duty to ensure she is raised properly, without the unfortunate influences her uncle allowed. His eyes scanned the crowd and came to rest on me. On the silver mark visible at the edge of my winter cloak, I drew the cloak tighter, but it was too late. He had seen and recognized what I was. The council also requires the surrender of any silver-marked individual sheltering among the packs. He continued, his eyes still on me. For questioning regarding their role in the recent unrest. Questioning, Kira repeated, her voice flat. Is that what you call it now? The messenger's face hardened. The council's patience is not unlimited, pack leader. You have 3 days to surrender both the child and any silver mark to our custody. After that, we will take them by force. With that, he and his companions turned their horses and rode away, leaving the village in stunned silence. I didn't wait to hear more. I pushed back through the crowd, now frozen in shocked discussion, and ran back to our house. Ember was waiting by the window, her face pressed against the glass, watching for me. Was it Uncle Nyx? She asked As I burst through the door, I knelt before her, taking her small hands in mine. How could I tell her? How could I explain that the monster who had killed her parents now wanted her? That Nyx was captured, possibly being tortured at this very moment? That we were both in danger simply for being who we were? No, little one, I said gently. Not Nyx, but I have news. I hesitated, then decided on a partial truth. Your uncle is alive. Ember's face lit up with joy. I knew it! I told you he'd keep his promise. Is he coming home? Not right away, I said carefully. He's been delayed. But knowing he's alive is good news, isn't it? She nodded enthusiastically, not seeing the worry I was trying to hide. When will he come? Before the winter feast? I want to show him my new healing sachets and how I can make the little flames now, just like you taught me. My heart squeezed painfully in my chest. Ember had indeed shown signs of having her own fire gift, tiny flames that would appear in her palms when she concentrated very hard. It was yet another reason the council would want her. Another reason they would fear her. I don't know when he'll come, I told her. But for now, I need you to help me with something very important. Can you do that? Her little face turned serious, eager to be helpful. What is it? We need to pack some things. Food, warm clothes, your special treasures. We might need to go on a journey soon. Like when we came here from your hut? She asked, already moving to gather her few precious possessions, a carved wooden wolf Nyx had made for her, a pretty stone she'd found in the river, the first healing sachet she'd made herself. Yes, something like that, I agreed, moving to my own corner of the house to gather what we would need. My mind was racing. We had to leave before the 3 days were up. Before the council's men returned in force, a soft knock on the door made me freeze. I motioned for Ember to stay quiet, then approached cautiously. Who is it? Kira, came the response. Let me in, Sari, quickly. I opened the door just enough to see it was indeed Kira, alone and looking worried. She slipped inside, eyes taking in our half-packed belongings. Good, she said. You're already preparing to leave. You know why the council really wants Ember, I said. It wasn't a question. Kira nodded grimly. She's the last of Nyx's bloodline. With both him and his brother dead, she would be next in line for the Alpha throne. The council can't allow that. They'll either kill her or... She glanced at Ember, who was watching us with wide eyes, and lowered her voice. Or use her. Raise her to be their puppet. And me? I asked, though I already knew the answer. The silver-marked are being hunted everywhere, Kira replied. The council fears what Nyx told the packs, that your kind were meant to rule alongside alphas. That together you could challenge their power. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. We'll leave tonight. Can you help us get past the village guards? Kira's face was troubled. Sorry, the council gave us 3 days. And you're considering obeying them? I asked, disbelief coloring my voice. After they captured your Alpha King? After they declared him traitor? The pack must survive, she said, not meeting my eyes. We have children, elders. We cannot risk everyone for 2 lives. I stared at her, understanding slowly dawning. You're going to hand us over. She didn't deny it, not willingly, but the pack comes first. It's what Nyx himself would order. Anger and betrayal burned hot in my chest. Nyx trusted you to protect us. And I have. For 2 months I've sheltered you, fed you, kept you safe. But now, she shook her head. Now the risk is too great. Get out, I whispered, fire flickering at my fingertips. Get out of our house. Kira looked like she wanted to say more, but thought better of it. At the door, she paused. I can give you until tomorrow at dawn. After that, my warriors will be watching. They have orders to stop you if you try to leave with the child. After she left, I sank onto a chair, my mind whirling. We had hours, not days, and we would be watched. "Are we in trouble?" Ember asked in a small voice. I looked at her innocent face and made a decision. I would not let the council take her. I would not let them use her or hurt her. I would protect this child with every ounce of power I possessed. "No, little one," I said with a confidence I didn't feel. "We're not in trouble. We're just going on an adventure a little sooner than I thought." I held out my arms, and she came to me, letting me hold her close. "Do you remember the stories about the silver-marked queens? How they protected their people, even when it was hard?" She nodded against my shoulder. "They were brave." "Yes, they were," I agreed. "And now we need to be brave too. Like them. Like your Uncle Nix." That night, after Ember had fallen asleep, I made my final preparations. I packed only what we could easily carry: food, water, warm clothes, a few healing herbs. I wrote a letter to leave for Nix, in case he somehow escaped and made it back to the village. I tucked it under a loose floorboard where Kira wouldn't find it. Then I sat by the window, watching the stars and thinking of the Alpha King, who had changed my life, who had shown me I wasn't cursed, who had given me a family, however briefly. "I'll keep her safe," I whispered to the night sky. "I swear it on my fire and my blood. They will not take her while I breathe." Dawn was still hours away when I gently woke Ember. Her eyes opened immediately, alert despite the early hour. I put a finger to my lips, and she nodded, understanding the need for quiet. We slipped out the back door of our house, into the small garden that was now covered in a thin layer of snow. The village was silent, most still sleeping. But I knew Kira would have posted guards, despite her promise of until dawn. I was right. A shadow moved near the edge of the garden, a warrior watching our house. I pulled Ember close, whispering in her ear, "Remember how I taught you to be very quiet, like we did when we left my hut? We need to do that now." She nodded solemnly. Then, surprising me, she reached up to touch the silver crescent on my collarbone. "We'll be okay," she whispered back. "You're powerful, like in the stories." Her faith in me was both a gift and a terrible weight. I only hoped I could live up to it. We moved like ghosts through the sleeping village, staying in shadows, freezing at any sound. Twice we had to hide as warriors passed, their eyes scanning the darkness. Each time, Ember remained perfectly still, not making a sound despite the cold that had to be seeping through her boots and cloak. We had almost reached the edge of the village when disaster struck. A dog barked, sensing our presence. Then another joined in. Lights appeared in windows as people woke. "Run!" I told Ember, grabbing her hand. "Run now!" We dashed for the trees beyond the village, no longer trying for stealth. Behind us, shouts rose as our escape was discovered. Ahead lay the dark forest, our only hope for shelter. We had just reached the first line of trees when I heard Kira's voice behind us. "Stop, sorry, don't do this." I didn't stop, didn't look back. Ember's hand was tight in mine as we plunged into the forest, branches whipping at our faces, snow crunching beneath our feet. "They're coming," Ember panted, as the sounds of pursuit grew louder behind us. "They're going to catch us." "No," I said fiercely. "They won't. I won't let them take you." I stopped abruptly, making a decision. We could not run them, not with Ember's short legs, not in the snow. But I had another option, one I had been afraid to use until now. I knelt before Ember, gripping her shoulders gently. "Do you trust me?" She nodded without hesitation. "Always." "Then hold on to me and don't let go, no matter what you see or feel. Can you do that?" She wrapped her arms around my neck, her faith in me absolute. I took a deep breath, reaching deep inside for the fire that always burned there. But this time, instead of bringing it out as flames in my palms, I let it spread through my entire body. The heat built quickly, flowing through my veins, illuminating my skin from within. Ember gasped but didn't let go as promised. I felt the fire reach my silver crescent, and suddenly, it was as if a door had opened in my mind, a door to power I had never known I possessed. I raised my hands, and walls of flame sprang up around us, cutting off our pursuers. I heard their shouts of alarm, the sudden retreat of footsteps. The fire didn't burn us, didn't even feel hot to me or Ember. It was an extension of myself, controlled and purposeful. "You're glowing," Ember whispered in awe. "Your mark is glowing silver." I couldn't see it, but I could feel it. The crescent on my collarbone burning cold and bright, like a piece of the moon itself had embedded in my skin. "Hold tight," I told her, and then I was running again, faster than I had ever moved before, my feet barely seeming to touch the ground. Ember clung to me, her face buried in my neck. Behind us, the wall of fire continued to burn, keeping our pursuers at bay. We ran until the village was far behind us, until my lungs burned and my legs trembled. Only then did I slow, letting the fire fade from my skin, from my veins. The silver glow of my mark dimmed to its normal appearance. I set Ember gently on her feet in a small clearing. Her eyes were huge, filled with wonder rather than fear. "That was amazing," she breathed. "You were like the queens in the stories, all fire and light." I managed a shaky smile, though exhaustion pulled at every limb. "I didn't know I could do that," I admitted. It's never been that strong before." "Uncle Nix said your power would grow," Ember told me matter-of-factly. "He told me when you weren't listening. He said you were special, even for a silver-marked." I didn't know what to say to that. My mind was still reeling from what I had just done. The firewalls, the speed, the sense of power flowing through me. Was this what the council feared? Is this why they had lied about the silver-marked for generations? There was no time to dwell on it. We had escaped the village, but we were far from safe. The council's men would be searching for us, and soon Kira would be forced to tell them which way we had gone. "We need to keep moving," I told Ember, checking that our packs were still secure. "We need to find somewhere to hide, somewhere they won't look for us." "Where?" Ember asked, her earlier excitement fading as reality set in. She looked very small and young in the vast, snow-covered forest. "I thought of my little hut, abandoned months ago. It would be the first place they'd look, but perhaps—" "I know a place," I said, making a decision. "A secret place I found as a child. It's a long walk, but we can make it if we're brave." "I'm brave," Ember said, lifting her chin. "Like you." I smiled at her, my heart both heavy and full. "Yes, you are. Now come, little one. We have a long journey ahead." As we set off through the trees, following the rising sun, I sent a silent prayer to whatever powers might be listening. Keep Nix alive. Help him find us. Let us be a family again. Until then, I would protect what was mine. The council would not take Ember. They would not extinguish this little spark of hope and light. Not while I had breath in my body and fire in my veins. They had underestimated the outcast fire tender for too long. It was time they learned what a silver-marked woman could do when she had something precious to protect. The winter solstice came, the longest night of the year. Ember and I had been hiding in my childhood secret place for almost a month, a small cave hidden behind a waterfall, now frozen into glittering ice curtains. The entrance was narrow, barely wide enough for an adult to squeeze through. But inside the space opened up, large enough for both of us to live somewhat comfortably. Long ago, I had found this cave while gathering herbs along the riverbank. I had kept it secret, making it my special hiding place when pack life became too hard to bear. Over the years, I had brought small comforts here, a rough shelf carved into the stone wall, a collection of soft furs for bedding, even a small fire pit with a crack in the ceiling that served as a chimney. It wasn't much, but it had kept us alive and hidden through the early winter. "Is today special?" Ember asked as I carefully placed our last candle on the small stone shelf. We had been rationing them carefully, using them only when necessary. Yes, little one, I replied. Today is the winter solstice, the longest night of the year. After today, the days will start getting longer again. Like the fire coming back? She asked, her golden eyes reflecting the small flames I had lit in our fire pit. Exactly like that, I smiled, touched by her understanding. In the old days, before the council's lies, the solstice was an important celebration for the silver-marked. It was a time of renewal and hope. Ember hugged her knees to her chest, watching me set out our meager feast, the last of our dried meat, a handful of nuts I had gathered, and 2 withered apples saved for this special occasion. Will Uncle Nix find us soon? It's been so long. My heart squeezed painfully. I had told Ember that Nix was searching for us, that he had escaped the council and would join us when it was safe. It was kinder than the truth that he was likely still a prisoner. Or worse. In my darkest moments, when Ember was asleep, I allowed myself to face the possibility that he might be gone forever. But in the light, for her sake, I kept hope alive. He's trying his very best, I said, sitting beside her and pulling her close. Nix is clever and strong. If anyone can find us, he can. We ate our small feast as I told Ember stories of solstices past, tales from my books about how the silver-marked once celebrated this night with great bonfires and magic. I embellished freely, creating a world where people like us were honored, not hunted, where our gifts brought joy, not fear. Let's make our own ceremony, Ember suggested when the stories were done, to help Uncle Nix find his way to us. What kind of ceremony? I asked, curious about what her clever mind would create. She thought for a moment, her small face serious in the firelight. We should light lots of candles, like a beacon, and maybe we could do some fire magic too? Make it big and bright so he can see it from far away. I hesitated. We had been so careful to keep our fire small, to use only dry wood that wouldn't smoke much. The cave's location had kept us hidden so far, but a large display of fire magic might be seen for miles. Yet something about the night, about Ember's hopeful face, made me want to try. Perhaps it was foolish, but after a month of hiding, of constantly looking over my shoulder, of watching our food supplies dwindle, I needed hope as much as she did. We'll need to be careful, I said finally. But yes, let's make a solstice beacon for Nix. Ember clapped her hands in delight. We spent the next hour gathering every candle stub, every bit of kindling we had saved. I showed Ember how to arrange them around our small cave, placing them where the light would reflect off the damp stone walls, multiplying their glow. Now for the magic, I said when all was ready. Watch carefully. I held out my hands, summoning the fire that lived within me. It came easier now, after weeks of practice. Small flames danced on my palms, and I shaped them with my thoughts. A wolf running, a crown, a child dancing. Ember gasped in delight at each new form. Your turn, I encouraged her. Remember how we practiced. Ember's face scrunched in concentration as she held out her small hands. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a tiny spark appeared, growing slowly into a flickering flame no bigger than a berry. Her face lit up with pride. I did it, she exclaimed. Look, Sari, I made fire. You did wonderfully, I praised her. Now, let's put all our fire together and make our beacon. Standing at the entrance to our cave, behind the curtain of frozen water, we combined our flames. Mine encircled hers, protective and strong. Together, we sent the fire streaming upward through the crack in the cave ceiling that normally served as our chimney. The flames shot into the night sky like a pillar of light, red and gold and silver. I held the magic for as long as I could, until my arms trembled with the effort. Finally, I let the fire fade. collapsing onto the cave floor, with Ember beside me. "Do you think he saw it?" she asked, her voice tired but hopeful. "If he was looking, he couldn't have missed it," I assured her, though I wondered if I had just made a terrible mistake. If the council's hunters were nearby, they too would have seen our beacon. That night, I slept fitfully, waking at every small sound. Ember curled against me, sleeping the deep sleep of children, but I lay awake, listening to the winter wind, wondering what I had done. Dawn was just beginning to lighten the sky when I heard the sound of footsteps crunching on snow, approaching our hidden cave. I rose silently, careful not to wake Ember. My heart pounded as I crept to the narrow entrance, peering through a small gap in the frozen waterfall. A figure stood on the riverbank, looking up at the ice-covered rocks. A tall figure with broad shoulders and black hair streaming in the wind. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming. Then he turned, and I saw his face, his golden eyes scanning the area as if searching for something. "Nix," I whispered, my voice catching in my throat. He couldn't have heard me, not with the sound of the wind and the frozen waterfall between us, but his head snapped toward my hiding place, as if I had shouted. Those golden eyes narrowed, focusing exactly where I stood hidden. I hesitated only a moment before squeezing through the narrow entrance, emerging onto the snowy bank. If this was a trap, if this was some trick of the council, then so be it. I couldn't hide any longer. "Sorry," he breathed, and it was his voice, his real voice, rough with emotion. "I found you." We stood frozen, 10 paces apart, neither quite believing what we were seeing. He looked thinner than when I had last seen him, with new scars on his face and a hardness around his eyes that hadn't been there before. His clothes were worn, his cloak torn in places, but he was alive. He was here. "How?" I asked, taking one small step toward him. "They said you were captured." "I was," he replied, also moving one step closer. "The council held me in their dungeons beneath the high temple. They wanted me to denounce the Silvermarked, to tell the Pax that I had been deceived by evil magic." His lip curled in disgust. "They thought they could break me." Another step closer. "But you escaped," he nodded. "With help." Not all on the council believe the old lies. Some remember the true history, the partnership between Alphas and Silvermarked that brought peace to the territories. One more step. It took time to gather allies, to plan. By the time I was free and made it back to the Northpack village, you and Ember were gone. "They were going to hand us over to the council," I explained, my voice tight with the memory of that betrayal. Kira said. "I know what Kira did," Nix interrupted, his eyes flashing with anger. "She has been dealt with." He took another step toward me. "I've been searching for you for weeks, following rumors, tracking scents that faded in the snow. Until last night, when I saw a pillar of fire and silver light shooting into the sky." His voice softened, and I knew it was you. We were close now, close enough that I could see the flecks of darker gold in his eyes, could smell the pine and smoke scent of him that I had missed so desperately. "Ember?" he asked, his voice catching on her name. "Is she?" "Safe," I assured him quickly. "Sleeping inside. She's grown inches since you saw her last, and her fire gift is getting stronger." Relief washed over his face. Then something else replaced it, a tenderness that made my heart ache. "And you? Are you well?" "I'm better now," I admitted, suddenly shy despite everything we had been through together. "Now that you're here." His hand reached out, hesitantly, as if he wasn't sure he was allowed to touch me. I met it halfway, our fingers intertwining in the space between us. That simple contact sent warmth flooding through me that had nothing to do with my fire magic. "I thought I'd lost you both," he said, his voice raw. "When Kira told me what happened, that you'd fled into the forest with council hunters on your trail, I feared the worst. We're survivors, Ember and I. I told him, squeezing his hand. We've had to be. He tugged gently on our joined hands, pulling me closer until there was barely space to breathe between us. I made you a promise, he murmured, that I would return, that we would be together. I intend to keep that promise, Sari. Before I could respond, a small voice called from the cave entrance. Uncle Nix. Ember stood there, her sleep-tousled hair wild around her face, her eyes wide with disbelief and joy. For one heartbeat, she didn't move. Then she launched herself forward, running across the snow and throwing herself into Nix's arms. He caught her, lifting her high and holding her tight against his chest. Little Spark, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Look how you've grown. I knew you'd find us, Ember declared, pulling back to look at his face. Sari said you would, and I believed her. We made a special fire last night to help you, and it worked. Nix's eyes met mine over Ember's head. Yes, he agreed softly. It worked. He set Ember down, but kept one arm around her shoulders as she leaned against him. With his other hand, he reached for me again. I stepped forward, completing our small circle. For the first time in months, I felt something like peace settle over me. We need to talk, Nix said, his voice turning serious. There's much you don't know, much that has happened since we parted. Let's go inside, I suggested. It's warmer, and we can speak freely. In our small cave, with the remnants of our solstice candles still glowing, Nix told us everything, how the council had tortured him, trying to force him to renounce the Silver Marked, how a faction within the council itself had helped him escape, led by an elder who remembered the old stories, the true history. The lies are unraveling, he said, accepting the cup of hot tea I offered him. Pack by pack, territory by territory, the truth is spreading about the Silver Marked, about their rightful place beside Alphas. Is that why you came for us? I asked, trying to keep my voice even. Because you need a Silver Marked to help your cause? His golden eyes snapped to mine, fierce and intense. I came for you because you are mine, he said simply. You and Ember, my family. I would have come if you had no power at all, if you were just an ordinary fire tender with no silver mark. My heart stuttered in my chest. And what happens now? Nix leaned forward, his face illuminated by our small fire. Now we take back what was stolen from us. The council has called for a great meeting of all packs at the winter's end. They think to name a new Alpha King, one they can control. His lips curved in a grim smile. But we will be there too, with proof of their lies, with allies from every territory. It will be dangerous, I said, thinking of the council's hunters, of how close they had come to catching us. Yes, Nix agreed, but we will not be alone. He reached into his cloak and pulled out an ancient scroll, carefully wrapped in oiled leather to protect it from the elements. This is what my brother died for, the true history of our people, written before the council's lies took root. He unrolled it carefully on the stone floor between us. The parchment was yellowed with age, the ink faded, but still legible. I leaned closer, Ember pressing against my side to see. Read, Nix urged me. See what they tried to hide for so long. I scanned the ancient text, my eyes widening as I took in words that rewrote everything I had been taught. And so it was decreed that no Alpha shall rule without a silver-marked mate by their side, for only together can true balance be achieved. The Alpha brings strength and protection, while the silver-marked brings healing and wisdom, neither complete without the other. It's all here, Nix said quietly. The truth they feared so much they were willing to kill for it, that the silver-marked were never cursed, but blessed, that your power was meant to balance ours, not serve it or be destroyed by it. I looked up from the scroll, my mind reeling. This changes everything. It already has, he replied. The pact territories are dividing those who cling to the council's lies and those who remember the old ways or are willing to learn them anew. His eyes burned into mine. I came not just to find you, but to ask you to stand with me. When I challenge the council, when I reclaim my throne, not behind me, but beside me, where you belong. I was speechless, overwhelmed by what he was asking, to step from the shadows into the full light, to stand before all the packs not as an outcast fire tender, but as what? As my mate? Nick said softly, answering my unspoken question. My queen, my equal in all things. Ember, who had been unusually quiet during this exchange, suddenly spoke up, like in the stories. The Alpha King and his Silver Queen. Her eyes were bright with excitement. And I'll be a princess. Nick smiled at her, ruffling her hair. Yes, little spark, if Sari accepts. All eyes turned to me, waiting for my answer. I looked at Nyx, at the love and hope in his golden eyes, at Ember, who had already claimed me as family in her heart, at the ancient scroll that proved everything I had been told about myself was a lie. I don't know how to be a queen, I said honestly. I've spent my life in the shadows, tending fires for others. And I don't know how to be the kind of king the packs truly need, Nyx replied. But together, perhaps we can learn. Perhaps we can build something new from the ashes of the old lies. He held out his hand to me, palm up, an invitation rather than a demand. What do you say, Sari? Will you light fires by my side instead of in the shadows? I looked at his outstretched hand, strong and scarred from battle, then at my own, calloused from years of work yet capable of holding flame without burning. Different hands, different powers, but perhaps meant to be joined. Yes, I said, placing my hand in his. Not because of ancient scrolls or prophecies, but because you saw me when no one else did. Because you trusted me with what you love most. I glanced at Ember, who was watching us with shining eyes. Because somehow, in the midst of danger and fear, we became a family. Nyx's fingers closed around mine, warm and sure. Then it's decided. At winter's end, we challenge the council together. Together, I agreed, as Ember threw her arms around both of us, completing our circle once more. Outside, the winter solstice sun rose fully above the horizon, sending rays of light through the frozen waterfall. They scattered across our small cave in rainbows of color, turning ordinary stone into something magical. A new day was beginning. The longest night was over, and somewhere in the distance, the future waited for us to claim it. 3 years passed, like water flowing in a stream, sometimes fast over rocks, sometimes slow in quiet pools, but always moving forward. I stood on the balcony of the pack house, watching as the fires were lit for the solstice celebration below. The warm summer air carried the scent of roasting meat and sweet honey cakes. Drums began their steady beat, calling everyone to gather. But this time, I wasn't hidden in the shadows. My silver crescent mark gleamed proudly against my skin, matched by the silver crown I wore beside Nyx's. The metal was light on my head, but the meaning it carried was not. Queen, partner, equal, words I never thought would describe me. The battle for truth had not been easy. When we challenged the council at winter's end 3 years ago, blood was spilled on both sides. Some packs stood with us, remembering the old ways or willing to believe the ancient scrolls. Others fought to keep things as they were, fearing change more than they feared lies. In the end, we won not just with strength and fire, but with truth that spread like sunrise across the territories. The old council was gone, replaced by a new one made of both alphas and silver marked, the balance restored as it was meant to be. Ember dashed past me on the balcony, now a confident young girl of 10, leading a group of children in a game of chase. Some bore the silver mark, Others did not, all equally cherished. Her laughter floated up to me, bright as the flames she could now call with ease. "Careful near the railings," I called, more out of habit than real worry. Ember was sure-footed and quick, growing more capable each day. "We will," she called back without slowing, her golden eyes flashing with mischief, so like her uncle's. "She'll be fine," Nick said, coming to stand behind me. His arms encircled my waist, his chin resting on my shoulder. "She survived council hunters and a winter in a cave. I think she can handle a balcony." I leaned back against his solid warmth. "I know, but I'll always worry a little." "That's what makes you a good mother to her," he replied, his lips brushing my ear. Mother, another word I never thought would be mine. But Ember had decided long ago that's what I was to her, and I had accepted the honor with an open heart. Nix's hand moved to rest gently on my growing belly. "And soon she'll have a brother or sister to chase after." The child within me kicked as if responding to its father's voice. 5 more months until we would meet this new little 1/2 alpha, half silver marked, the first of its kind in generations. "Nervous?" Nix asked, feeling the tension in my shoulders. "A little," I admitted. "It's the first time many of the visiting packs will meet a Silver Queen. Some still cling to the old prejudices, even after all this time." He turned me gently to face him, his golden eyes serious. "You who faced down warriors with nothing but fire and courage? I think you'll manage diplomats just fine." I smiled at the memory of that first battle we fought together, when I was still just a fire tender discovering my power. I had a lot to protect back then. "And now?" he asked, his thumb tracing the line of my cheekbone. "Even more," I replied, looking down at where our child grew, then out to where Ember played with the other children. Below us, the gathered packs waited for our appearance to begin the solstice celebration. Representatives from all territories had come, some curious, some still wary, but all accepting the new way of things, willingly or not. The silver marked among them, once hidden, now honored, stood at the forefront, ready to lead the fire ceremony that would open the celebrations. I saw my own wonder reflected in their faces as they looked up at me, their queen who had once been an outcast like them. "It's time," Nick said, offering me his arm. "They're waiting for us." I took a deep breath and placed my hand on his arm. Together, we descended the wide stone steps from the balcony to the courtyard where the main fire pit burned bright. Ember ran to join us, taking her place on my other side with the dignity of a princess, when the occasion called for it. The crowd parted as we walked through, some bowing their heads in respect, others watching with careful eyes, measuring us against their expectations. I held my head high, my silver crown catching the firelight. We reached the center of the gathering. Nix raised his hand, and silence fell over the crowd. "Welcome, friends and allies, to the summer solstice celebration," he called, his voice carrying easily to every corner of the courtyard. "Tonight we honor the longest day, the triumph of light over darkness." He paused, his eyes finding mine. "Just as 3 years ago, we brought light to the darkness of lies that had divided us for too long." I stepped forward, my turn to speak. Once, the thought of addressing so many would have terrified me. Now, it felt as natural as calling fire. "Tonight, we celebrate not just the solstice, but the unity of Alpha and Silver Marked," I said, "of strength and magic, of protection and healing." My hand rested on my rounded belly, and the promise of a future where no child will be told they are cursed for being different. A murmur of approval ran through the crowd. Ember squeezed my hand, her small face solemn yet proud. "Let the fires be lit," Nix called. "Let the celebration begin." As one, the silver marked around the courtyard raised their hands. Flames leapt to life in a dozen fire pits, colors dancing from red to gold to brightest silver. Gasps of wonder rose from those who had never seen such magic performed openly. I joined them, raising my own hands. Fire answered my call, forming shapes above the central pit, a wolf running, a crown, a child dancing. The flames grew higher, brighter, until they lit the entire courtyard like daylight. The drums began again, faster now, calling everyone to dance. Ember was the first to move, joining her friends in a circle around the main fire. Adults followed, their bodies swaying, their faces alight with joy and firelight. Nyx took my hand, leading me to join them. "Remember when you told me you only understood fire?" he murmured as we moved together to the rhythm of the drums. "How it needs both air and fuel?" I nodded, leaning back against his chest as we danced. "You were describing us," he said. "I was suffocating under the weight of lies and tradition. You were the air that let me breathe again. And together, we created something that could warm the world," I finished. Around us, the celebration grew, Alpha and Silver marked dancing side by side, children playing without fear of showing their gifts. It wasn't perfect harmony. There were still those who frowned at the changes, who kept their distance from the Silver marked. Old fears died slowly. But it was a beginning, a new chapter in our shared history. I, who had once been nameless, forgotten, now stood tall as they chanted our names together. The Alpha King and his Silver Queen. The outsider who had found her place not by changing who she was, but by embracing it fully. And as I raised my hand to call forth more ceremonial flames, I realized that the greatest transformation wasn't in my title or position, but in finally understanding that what I had once thought was my greatest weakness was actually my most magnificent strength. The fire in my blood, the silver mark on my skin, these weren't curses to be hidden. They were gifts to be shared, to light the way forward into a future where no one would have to tend fires alone in the shadows again. "Look," Ember said, pointing to the eastern sky. The first stars were appearing as twilight deepened, even as the solstice sun still painted the western horizon in gold and crimson. "The stars are coming out to join our celebration." Nyx's arm tightened around me. "A perfect balance," he said softly. "Light and dark, sun and stars, Alpha and Silver marked." "Balance," I agreed, resting my head against his shoulder as our child kicked again inside me. "That's what we're building, one day at a time." And as the night deepened around our bright fires, I knew with bone-deep certainty that I was exactly where I was meant to be, not in the shadows, but in the light. Not alone, but surrounded by family. Not cursed, but blessed beyond measure.